Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means we are in the Hillsdale Dialogue, the last broadcast hour of the week, whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel or listening on the Salem Radio Network or listening at hillsdale.edu, where all things Hillsdale are collected. We do the last broadcast hour of the week, always with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, or one of his colleagues. Dr. Arnn, a good Friday to you. We're taping this on Wednesday, and I tell people that only because, given the situation in Iran, anything could happen on Wednesday night and Thursday night, so I just want them to be aware of that. Let's start with Iran. What do you make of what has happened there? The largest massacre since Baba Yar in 1941 when the Nazis advanced through Poland. I mean, just gunned down random people. And it beat Tiananmen Square. What's that say to you?
Well, they're meaner than hell. I have a friend, I won't say his name, who's an Iranian immigrant, tech guy in Silicon Valley. And he says Iran is a wonderful country, and the people don't like these mullahs. You know, there are a lot of professional people there, a lot of educated people there, a lot of modern people there, and the old people there, because that regime's been in place, since 1979. They remember when Iran was a much more open place where you could wear what you wanted to and you could go to the beach and swim, and you can't do that anymore. So there's apparently a great pent-up energy for reform, and they use brutal techniques to suppress it. And it's a terrorist regime, right? They give a lot of emphasis to exporting terror. And they've been crippled in that after they went farther. They've always gone too far, but they went farther too far. What's that old joke? You need to know how far to go when you're going too far. And the attacks on Gaza, that were just particularly brutal and awesome, awful. And so Israel, with the help of the United States, compromised them, harmed them a lot, and they're weaker. And these uprisings come after that. So I remember reading a story about the Taliban back before they resumed their control of it, back before the second Gulf War, and how they had a young man had defected and told what was done to him. He was conscripted into the secret police, and what he went around doing at night was listening for people playing popular music or playing cards or any drinking. And in the daytime, spying on houses, going up close to him, see what he heard. And in the daytime, he was checking the length of men's beards and dress and women's dress. And he could grab them and single them out and put them in prison. This comprehensive enforcement came over the society, and that's what Iran is like.
Well, I think in Aristotelian terms, is it a despotism, a tyranny? Is it the worst form of government? It's not an oligarchy, even though the IRGC represents this sort of quasi-corporation military. It's still run by one guy, Ayatollah Khamenei. So I think it's a tyranny, isn't it?
Well, it's run by clerics, and their claims, it's ancient tyranny. Modern tyranny has a twist, and the Iranian has an additional twist, because what we didn't have what there was not in the ancient world was scientific surveillance, and so that's why we invented the name totalitarianism. They can watch everything now. Just read. We did the course on the totalitarian. It's tyranny more intense, and using modern science as a tool. And then add a twist on that, because in the ancient world outside Israel, which was not in close contact, but some contact with the world of Socrates, which came 1,500 years later or so, you didn't have universal religion. Islam is from about 600 AD. Judaism is from about 2000, 2500 BC. Christianity is about 1 AD. Well, if you have a universal religion and then people rule in the name of it, that means that they get their authority they claim from God, and that means there's no appeal above them by the people. It's one of the glories of Christianity that it does not establish governments. Judaism does, but only a government for the chosen people. So now you've got these guys and they pretend to be on a mission from God and appointed by God and speaking for God. And how do you appeal above them? So those changes, modern science, modern surveillance, computers, drones, cameras everywhere, algorithms to watch what everybody does, and then add in this pernicious understanding of the relation between religion and politics, and you get comprehensive despotism.
And so with that, the president has got the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group there. They've flooded the area with all sorts of military assets, defensive as well as offensive. And the president has done what he always does, which is to say A and not A, pretty much in the same sentence, often without a paragraph, without a comma. And it's wonderfully ambiguous if you're trying to figure out what he's doing and you're an enemy. But the United States is not used to people like this. How do you assess his actions in response to the massacre? And then what do you think he's going to do and should do? And maybe should not do as well?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I read a good article. So first of all, yeah, he's a negotiator. He's good at it. And he does leave a lot of ambiguity, which he has to do, or he should do. And of course, that leaves a lot of ambiguity for us. And if you just think of the dramatic things he's done, I mean, Maduro is in New York City right now in prison with his wife. And how that happened, you know. And he talked about it off and on, as you rightly described, sometimes yes, sometimes no. A couple of times he directly said to Maduro, it's time for you to step down. That was even in the first term he was saying that. And then by golly, one day he just went and got him. And so that means that these guys in Iran have got to be worried, right? What's he going to do? Who knows what he's going to do? And he's sent, and the Venezuela thing was preceded by a very large military, naval and air and improved ground buildup in and around Venezuela. And that went on for some weeks or months. I'm pretty sure it's a public fact, but I read the Justice Department memo on the legality of the Venezuela thing. And that was written in December. And I happen to know the young man who wrote that. And so they were planning, right? And he didn't, the memo doesn't, a lot of it's redacted. The memo doesn't have all the details, but in other words, they were thinking hard about this, right? And whatever Trump is, they are planning to do, they're probably thinking very hard about it. They're just not saying what it is. But they are gathering force there. And you couldn't say on Trump's record that he will be unwilling to use it.
I do not think, though, tell me I'm wrong, I do not think we will see any troops on the ground there. It will all be done beyond the range of an easy Iranian shot. That does not mean that our troops are not at risk. They are at risk because they're stationed at places certain, and they have ballistic missiles in Iran, and they have targeting capabilities. So it's not without risk. But do you think that level of massacre can be allowed to go unpunished by the West, given that they're not a nuclear power and they can't, nuclear power is in a different category. They're not a nuclear power. Ought we to do a punitive strike?
The answer is, let me tell a story as by way of answer. I read a really great article, and I can find it and post it on Hugh for Hillsdale. And it said, maybe the key to Trump's foreign policy is to figure out that he's trying to constrain these enemies. He doesn't want to rule them. He doesn't want to occupy them. He wants them to behave themselves. He doesn't want to take responsibility for democracy in Iran or anywhere else except the United States. And so he uses tools that place them in a bind. and constrain their actions. And he has done that very systematically to Iran. Iran is much more constrained now than it was a year ago. And they're weaker than they were, and they're besieged. They're in a world of hurt. And he warned them 100 times. Right?
And he continues to warn them. And as we talk, he's given them another invitation to talk. We don't know whether or not they will or how long that is, but we'll be posted on that and keep everyone. Don't go anywhere except where Larry mentioned. Hugh for Hillsdale.com or everything Hillsdale's at Hillsdale.edu. Stay tuned.
This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Next week, we will return with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, to part 19 of our series on Winston Churchill's World War II memoirs. They're fabulous. But every few weeks, I pause with Dr. Arnn, look around the world with him, since many of you hang on his every word, and that's a good idea to do. You'd have been right a lot more than you'd have been wrong over the last many years of this program, 13, I think. Now, Greenland, Dr. Arnn, is in the news. And I think I know what he's doing, and I think it's working. But what do you think he's doing, and do you think it's working?
I think I know, and I think it's working. First of all, Greenland is important. We're going to get to it. We're not this week, but later we're going to get to the submarine warfare in 1942-43.
Yep.
And we will see that it was concentrated off Greenland, between Greenland and Iceland and the United Kingdom, where the Atlantic is relatively narrow and where we didn't have until the end of 1943 air power to protect our convoys. And Churchill thought, he writes in this book that we're reading, that that's the place where they could have lost the war because Britain was becoming cut off from the world. Greenland is strategically important, and it has been every time there's, and in modern conditions, more important, right? Because now you can reach so far, and yet the Atlantic is so big that where it gets a bit narrower, there's opportunity. And that's our route to Europe and Europe's route to us. So, yeah, it's important. Now, we have a lot of rights there. We have military bases there. We have the right to have them there. And one thing he's asking for is that they become permanent.
Yes.
That we have a kind of semi-sovereignty. So if there's a change of regime, if Greenland becomes independent or somebody else takes it over, we have a right, we have a legally negotiated right to be there in perpetuity. And he seems to be aiming for that.
And I remind people of Guantanamo Bay, which is ours in perpetuity in Cuba. And we use it, and we're never going to give it up, and nor would we want to relinquish sovereignty there, although Presidents Obama and Biden tried to close the prisoner camp there. They never did. Still a half dozen to 20 people down there. I'm never quite sure. But that's sovereign territory and also extends out into the exclusive economic zone, 230 miles. So I think it's really about keeping the Chinese from overfishing and intercepting hypersonics that are flying not like an ICBM up into the upper atmosphere and beyond the space and then back down, but fly low to the ground and fast. We have to forward deploy defense.
Yeah. And, that is if you study international relations, which I did in graduate school and still follow, you find out in war where the United States is vulnerable. Did you know, for example, that the strategy of Lincoln and Grant was that the vulnerable point was the Mississippi?
Yes.
Said you can get into the heartland of America by the Mississippi. And the East Coast ports, which are open and great, tend to be mountainous country between that and the rest of the country. And, Grant lost an awful lot of soldiers and killed a lot of soldiers in the Shenandoah Valley, whereas General Sherman, when he broke out from Atlanta after Grant had taken Vicksburg, he had quicker movement. So now, New Orleans is an enormous port, and getting out of the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, you have to go by Cuba. Right? And Cuba makes it narrow there. And so if there's some major hostile military base there, naval base there, it can cut off our access. And then if they got strong enough, they could try to reproduce the first territory conquered by the Union in the Civil War was Louisiana. And then they go up the Mississippi and they start winning battles up the Mississippi. You had to get past Vicksburg, which was a very fortified place on cliffs looking down on the Mississippi. And Grant did that by a siege. And when Vicksburg fell, right at the same time as the Battle of Gettysburg, that's when the war turned. And so, these things matter, right? And if you're thinking about the defense, China is all over Venezuela, or they were.
They were.
And they're all over Latin America, and they're mucking around with Cuba, and they've got interest in Greenland. And so he's thinking about the defense of the homeland. And those are very intelligent steps.
He also has Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State. I think Mike Pompeo was a great one in the first term. And in the second term, I think some of this hemispheric focus is coming from Secretary Marco Rubio. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I have a alum, really great guy, and he sends me memes. 6 months ago, I didn't know what a meme was, but I get a whole bunch of them every day. And there's a meme thread running now where Rubio is, he's always sitting in the same place at the State of the Union message, I think. And he's wearing the uniform of the potentate of Venezuela, and then he's wearing a soldier's uniform. He's just going around solving all the problems in the world. And it is a remarkable record he's got in 1 year in that job. He's a very talented man. And
as President Trump said, he's got a lot of Cuban in him. He said to me on this program 3 weeks ago, Marco's got a lot. I think it's 100% Cuban to be exact. It's a Cuban American. I don't think there's any other genealogy of which I'm aware. But he's always been aware, as anyone from Miami is aware, of how close Cuba is to the United States, and it cannot become a base for Hezbollah or China or anyone. And I do think Greenland is the same way, that we have one competitor in this world. Its name is China, and they have a lot of countries that are dependent upon their Belt and Road Initiative and their money and their oil, and we do not care for them to be our neighbors. And I think that's all that we need to know about Greenland for the time being. He's not going to make war on it. Don't go anywhere, America, except to hillsdale.edu. All of the Hillsdale courses are aligned there, and you can sign up for Imprimis, their free monthly speech digest, by just going to hillsdale.edu and find the Imprimis page and sign up. And for all the Hillsdale dialogues going back 13 years, go to hughforhillsdale.com.
Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome back, America. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest on this, the concluding hour of our broadcast every week. Oh, Canada, Dr. Arnn. I wrote a long piece for Fox News this week just denouncing Prime Minister Carney's speech at Davos, because speeches matter. And he lumped us in as a hegemon with China and he called on the middle powers of the world to make sure they're strong enough to hold off both hegemons. This came a week after he had been shaking hands with Xi Jinping. I guess he's forgotten the Uyghurs, he's forgotten Hong Kong, he's forgotten Jimmy Lai, he's forgotten Taiwan. We're the bad guys in that speech. Now, I love Canada. My daughter-in-law is a Canadian and became an American, so she's a Canadian-American. Her parents are wonderful, her family's wonderful. I'm not mad at any Canadian. You're closer to Canada than I am, but what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah, just think, doesn't everybody love Canadian bacon? Well, there's a theme here, right? This is happening. Trump has adjusted the terms of trade, and that doesn't just mean tariffs and international trade. It means national defense, and it means pressure on, with our allies, with Europe and with Canada and others too. And he's also pressing them about freedom, and they don't like it, right? They like to control the internet. And he's pressing them about their immigration policies, which look like a disaster in the making in Europe, or maybe a disaster already made. And so, of course, they do what powers do. They gravitate to our chief rival. And there's some ground for that, I think. They're not the same places anymore that they used to be. The European Union, if you look at it as a representative form of government, the best you can say about it is that the control of the people over it is attenuated.
And that's
not
generous.
much control.
That's generous.
Yeah. And so they're an international class, those rulers in Brussels of the European Union, and they censor what people say, and they put pressure on the governments, and the governments have a lot of trouble standing up to them. And if they don't like what you're doing, they fine you daily, which they're doing to Hungary because they don't like Hungary's immigration policies, which are restrictive. And so you can just see that's not entirely different from the way China is governed. And so there's some, China is the administrative state on steroids. It's not really the government owns all the property, which is the Marxist idea. It's the government controls all the property, directly and indirectly by 1,000 means. And the Communist Party says, what's what? And Xi right now says, what's what? And so it's, to some at the Davos crowd, that looks like not so bad, really, Look how it modernizes. Look how strong it is. Look, it might be militarily stronger than we are right now, and that's dangerous. And certainly it's militarily much stronger than they are. And so they get mad at us and they go to them. And, if you saw Macron's speech at Davos.
I did not watch him. No.
Well, it was an appeal. Europe is open to China. Come join us. And just don't underestimate the power of those guys, the Chinese. I had a minister in the Orbán government in Hungary come to visit last year. He's a good guy. He sort of invited himself. I like him. So we had him, and he gave a talk. And he's, Orbán is Hungary for the Hungarians, right? There are 10 million Hungarians. They're members of the European Union. They have to be, because they have to trade. They have to have it's a free country. The people can vote for who they want to. And they need to be prosperous. And then on the other side, they got Russia. They're in a world of hurt. And this guy who is he's completely anti-communist, just as I am. He said, we have attracted the Belt and Road to Budapest. And I said, wowie, really? How's that? What's that about? He said, well, Poland has it, and they won't share the benefits.
Huh.
And so I thought about it. Yeah, and I thought about that a lot. And, one of our advantages in Asia has been that we're far away. And there's a lot of conflict among those nations, and we're rather far away. That may be how China looks to Hungary, right? They got nothing but trouble all around them. These guys coming from afar.
Time for a Paul Revere. We got to wake up because I did not realize Belton Road was in Hungary and Poland. No doubt they want to go to Canada, and no doubt we don't want that. Stay tuned, America. I'll be right back to talk Minnesota with Dr. Arnn on the Hillsdale Dialogue, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, Dr. Arnn. There have been 2 deadly shootings in Minnesota. There's been a massive fraud in Minnesota. There was a massive infusion over the last 15 years into Minnesota of about 60 to 75,000 Somalians. In fact, in St. Cloud, Minnesota, a town of 68,000 people, 4,400 Somalians were settled there. What do you think is going on in Minnesota other than it reminds me a whole lot of the Weathermen? I'm old enough to remember from high school the Weathermen and the Symbionese Liberation Army. The 2 people who were shot were victims of both the bullets and the people in the background moving people around. I'm very, very concerned about Minnesota. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, it's terrible. I'll add a dimension to this. They're having a fight with the Trump and the federal government is having a fight with Minnesota over the voter rolls. And a Catholic bishop, who's a friend of mine calls a good man, published an article in the Wall Street Journal last week that said, for safety's sake, those illegal immigrants in Minnesota should get a driver's license immediately. Well, if you get a driver's license, then you can vote.
You can.
And, at least in. And so what's all this about, right? Why did he take 50 to 70,000 Obama, 50 to 75,000 Somalis and put them in Minnesota? All of a sudden, and that just, there's a really good New York Times article. I confess I couldn't find it this morning. Actually, I did find it, but I can't. It's a paywall, and I wasn't prepared to pay him the money. And it talked about how it changed the town. It's a nice little town, St. Cloud. I think St. Olaf College might be there. Nice little college, fabulous choir program. And it just, the parks are different. The streets are different. And, people in Minnesota are really nice. And this is troubling stuff. And they feel bad about it, too. And then there is an enormous organization behind this. I think there's likely to be news on Powerline. There is every day about all this. And those guys, Hinderaker and Scott Johnson, I know best. Well, Hayward, too. They live up there. Well, Hinderaker and Scott Johnson live up there.
Yep.
And they're reporting on it, right? And, Waltz has not cooperated with the federal authorities. There's a wonderful statement by him in which he says, the federal government places responsibility for immigration policy in a federal agency. We don't have any authority over it, he said. He said that a year ago or something. In the course of, we're not going to have anything to do with it, right? Now, on the other hand, he also says, what happens on our streets, our law enforcement's got to be involved. So what's that about, right? And, you're the lawyer here, but this Constitution and the laws made pursuant to it shall be the supreme law of the land.
The old supremacy clause and the commitment of all things immigration to the federal government exclusively.
That's right. And so they, and we don't know the full story about these shootings, which are tragic, and we will find out in due course. But it's a hostile environment for law enforcement. It's organized and it's elaborate. And somebody sent me yesterday, Powerline is apparently studying this, but it's a list of who gave money for this protest in Minnesota. And the numbers are very large, if it's true. And I don't know if it's true, but it does seem to be very well coordinated and organized. And
there are over at Fox Digital, there is a very long story on the WhatsApp and the other means signal messaging among the groups organizing, and they are pursuing ICE as though ICE were foreign invaders. And in fact, they're agents of the federal government, which is the supreme law of the land. And I think Minnesota's tipped over into chaos, and chaos causes casualties. It's terrible what happened to these 2 people. But I do think that Waltz and the dopey mayor Jacob Fry, have not helped anyone accomplish anything there. Not in the least.
Well, Walz did call in public for people to track the activities of ICE and take their cameras and photograph what they do. And, what they do is in public. It's nothing wrong photographing it. They ought to try to do it carefully and not hurt anybody if they can help it. But to have the official hostility of the local government makes the situation much more difficult.
Have you, in your study of American history, after the Civil War, I'll bring up the Civil War after the break in John Calhoun, do you ever remember where state and local governments opposed the federal government in the exercise of a committed power to the federal government? I don't. And I've been teaching common law for 30 years. I don't remember it.
When was George Wallace in Alabama? That was
early 60s. And there was Estes, not Kefauver, the guy down in Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas, stood in the...
Orville Faubus.
Orville Faubus. That's right. He was one that opposed. But then the National Guard, then Eisenhower sent in the 82nd or the 101st and rolled right over him because that's right. He was going to enforce the federal law.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so we can talk about the Civil War and the nullification crisis, but the government is a mess. This situation is dangerous in many ways, including politically dangerous, right? Because first of all, there's a lot of radicals in America, probably more on the left than the right, but they're on both. And radicals, I mean people who are wrongly radical. And then in general, people are rather suspicious and afraid of the government. And so when it does strong things, I've always thought that they had changed America in ways that would be very difficult to undo when they let, 9, 10 million people in the Biden years.
I would double that number. And when we come back, we'll talk about that. President Obama allowed in 54,000 Somalis, refugees, between 2009 and the end of his administration into Minnesota. 54,000. That's a lot. Stay tuned, America. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn talking about the nullification theory. Welcome back, America. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All the dialogues at hughforhillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, we have 3 minutes in this short segment. We've done John Calhoun before in the Hillsdale Dialogues, but I never expected nullification theory to arise in Minnesota after the 1828, 1832, and ultimately the Civil War put it to rest. The states don't get to ignore the federal law. Is that not settled?
Yeah, what that is a doctrine that was born in John Calhoun, who claimed lineage for the doctrine back to Madison and Jefferson in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions at the time of the founding. And his claim was it was a constitutional fact that states could nullify a law by the federal government. The operation of the law in their own territories or a group of states could simply overcome it. And the trouble with that is a constitutional matter is that the Constitution of the United States is about 4,500 words long, and it doesn't say that. It says the opposite.
It says the opposite.
And Calhoun was reluctant to talk, and all through the Civil War, right? The Confederacy, the slavers who led the Confederacy, I hasten to say most in the Confederacy were not slavers. They never talked about the right of revolution because the slaves were listening, right? They twisted the Constitution into a pretzel. And if the people of Minnesota think that Donald Trump is a despot, they have the right in nature to rebel against him and use violence if they want to. John Locke calls that the appeal to heaven. But that's not what they're talking about.
And that's not what they believe. They don't believe that either.
No, it's not what they don't believe it either. But the truth is the Constitution is pretty clear on all this stuff. And I'm the last guy to say that I endorse everything the federal government does. Indeed, I oppose most of what it does. I don't even think it makes the laws the right way anymore. But having said that, Tim Walz doesn't make a blind bit of sense saying that the states can even resist efforts to enforce the federal law.
A blind bit of sense. I'm going to take that and use that. Tim Waltz does not make a blind. Is that an Arkansas saying? We're out of time, but is that an Arkansas saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one for the books. I'll use that on Senator Cotton next week.
I'm proud of it.
A blind bit of sense. That's like Reddit up the house in Pittsburgh. It's a local dialect. Dr. Larry Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu, including your application for next year, though it's getting pretty late in the day if you're a senior. But go there and take all the courses and get smart. You can get smart, you can get smarter, and you can get smarter still by taking Hillsdale courses at hillsdale.edu. All of my dialogues with Dr. Arnn and his colleagues are collected at HughForHillsdale.com. HughForHillsdale.com. Next week, episode 19 in World War II land with Winston Churchill. Don't miss it, and I'll see you on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.